Chapter 415. Controlling the cultists to kill each other, trapping the two iron golems, and dealing with the girl with the nose ring, who was actually not a threat, and preventing her from harassing Death Knell's battle. Poison Ivy seemed to have a lot of work to do, but it was not serious at all. Although the cultists were ferocious, they were a group of ordinary people. Plus, they were malnourished and would bleed for no reason, so their bodies were weaker than ordinary people. The girl with the nose ring was also a newcomer to the magic world. Her shouts were earth-shattering. Thea estimated that Damien could kill her even if he used all his magic and martial arts skills, so she was not a strong opponent. Poison Ivy had great potential and could easily control the flow of the battle. Her methods were strange and mysterious, and she was better than a non-magic person. Thea was optimistic about her future. While they were fighting, Thea dragged Old Man Sargon's body over. The old man had a cloth wrapped around his head, and he seemed to be an Indian. Thea had gotten his big gift, so she was not interested in his black body. She took out a small bag from the side of the body and opened it. There were 5 or 6 dazzling gemstones inside. Thea took out a gemstone and looked at the quality of the gemstone with a torch as if nothing had happened on the battlefield. She curled her lips and secretly scolded him for being poor. Although she did not study gemstones as deeply as Catwoman, Thea relied on her female talent to judge that these gemstones were only of an acceptable level. Old Man Sargon did not know that his body was almost cold, but he was still being looked down upon. In fact, he was also helpless. Although he was born in a rich family in India, he was considered rich compared to his countrymen who could transport tens of thousands of people in a train. But compared to Thea, he was a complete pauper. First of all, the wealth belonged to his family, not him. There were many branches in his family, and all of them were asking for money. In order to reduce the attention of the secular world, he did not dare to use magic recklessly. In India, there were corrupt people everywhere, and they wanted money everywhere. There was not much wealth for him to freely use. Secondly, his wealth was in the most basic industry, which was commonly known as a landlord. His family owned a large amount of land in India, and every year, tens of thousands of farmers helped his family farm. 200 years ago, this would have been something worth bragging about. But in today's information society, it could only be exchanged for size from the onlookers. The last and most crucial point was that he had met Zatara and his friends 30 years ago. The other two were not considered wealthy. Only Zatara, who lived in Gotham, had a decent financial situation. The few of them had founded the cult, and the daily funds had been paid by Zatara and Sargon. With Zatara's death, the cult's funds had been cut in half. Old Sargon had to fork out his coffin money to barely survive until today. In such a tight economic crisis, he really didn't have the extra money to buy gems. Thea despised the old man's poverty. "You're so poor, why do you still want to play with gem magic? What a joke. It seems that this skill can only be developed in my hands." Thea weighed the bag with a few gems in her hand and thought to herself, "Among the mages, I'm the richest, and among the rich, I'm the best at magic." It was probably referring to people like Thea. Gem magic. Gems in front, magic behind. The importance of good gems could be seen from this. Without boasting, Thea was the best at this spell, except for those dragons who were hiding in some unknown dimension. She had been busy for the past few years and had not deliberately collected any gems. But as her reputation grew, there was an endless stream of people who wanted to see her, visit her, and make friends with her. The first meeting required a greeting gift. This was basic human interaction. Those who were qualified to see her were either rich or noble. These people did not want to be laughed at, so they racked their brains to give her gifts. Thea was a young woman, so what should she give her? There was no mistake in giving her gems. Even though she had rejected many of them, there were still more precious gems and gems that filled the 12 safes in her house. Among them, there were more than 300 pieces that would leave their names in history. If Thea had not given some to Diana, this number would have doubled. Catwoman had sourly said many times that Thea had been targeted by international robbers. It was not without reason. She used an Earth-type spell to dig a huge hole and buried Sargon, who was poor but still played with gems. Looking at the battlefield, Thea's mind was already immersed in fantasizing about how many gems she needed to make to blow Darkseid up into the sky. A flash of silver interrupted her daydream. A teleportation portal? A man and a woman walked out of it. The man was wearing a khaki trench coat with a dirty white shirt underneath. His tie was loosely tied. The man looked dispirited. His face was covered in stubble, and he had a cigarette in his mouth. The man did not pay much attention to what happened after the teleportation. He seemed to be trying his best to explain something to the woman beside him. The woman had shoulder-length hair and wore a purple jacket with a white shirt inside. The V-neck design showed off her indescribable pair of stalwart things. Her legs were covered in demonic fishnet stockings and a pair of leather boots. The woman had a pretty face and a resolute aura, which was a stark contrast to the lazy and cunning man beside her. Listen to me, Ja. The Croydon compass can help you find anything. That's enough, Constantine. I've had enough of your hypocritical lies and malicious help. You be *starred. Scum. You always get me into trouble. I just want to find my father's belongings. You go on your own. The purple-clothed woman spat at the man's face without any elegance. After that, she was stunned by the lively atmosphere in the square. She stuttered her words and looked at the situation in front of her in confusion. Her first reaction was similar to the Cold Flame Church's initial guess. This was the government's secret army encircling and annihilating a lively social organization. The man's reaction was much calmer than hers. A trace of doubt flashed through the corner of his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cynicism. The night wind was a little strong. He reached out to cover his mouth and lit the cigarette. He took a deep breath and said to the woman in a slightly intoxicated manner, I didn't cause this trouble. I was planning to sneak in. Sneak in my ass. There were at least 1,000 people in this square. Even a mosquito couldn't fly in with so many people. The woman considered the man's misdeeds and automatically imagined that this was specially designed for her. The two of them could not figure out what was going on. Out of caution, they roughly observed the battlefield. The first thing they saw was poison ivy sitting on a 3-meter-tall man-eating flower. Couldn't be helped. This had nothing to do with magic. It was just that poison ivy was too high profile. Anyone with good eyesight could see her at a glance. What is this? A human? The two mages with extraordinary knowledge were also attracted by poison ivy's strange life form. Was this a human? Chapter 4:16. Constantine and Zatanna. Should they be here? Thea could not figure it out. According to their conversation, Zatanna was here to look for her father's relic, while Constantine's purpose was the same as old Ma's. They were both here to look for the compass. Could it be that Malcolm was really here? Thea thought that it was a little cruel to annihilate an entire family just to find out something. But now it seemed that these guys were right. She immediately activated the Eye of Horus and looked into the depths of the castle through the layers of magic barriers. The sudden appearance of the two unexpected people made Grand Alchemist Tanarak, who was being tortured by Death Knell's anti-magic bullets, so excited that he let out a roar. An hour ago, if these two dared to swagger into the Church of Cold Flame, he would definitely teach them a lesson that they would never forget. But now, he could not even take care of himself. He could not figure out how Death Knell, the big guy, had so many anti-magic bullets. The alchemy products that he had painstakingly accumulated over the years were being consumed rapidly. If these two did not interfere, he would have to run away. Zatanna, come and help me. I know where your father's relic is. He was my best friend when he was alive. The Grand Alchemist knew Zatanna. To a certain extent, it could be said that he watched her grow up. As for whether he was her father's best friend, only God knew. His idea was extremely insidious. It would be best if he could get them to help him. If he could not, he would lure the enemies to attack Zatanna. Then he would have a chance to escape. So his shout was extremely loud. His thin and weak body almost used up all the energy in his dantian. His voice reverberated from his abdomen all the way to the square. On the other side of the battlefield, Papa Midnight, who was dealing with an errand with Mr. E, also heard the shout. They had fought for less than a minute, and both of them had tacitly stopped their attacks. Now that he heard the Grand Alchemist's words, he also noticed the man and woman on the other side of the battlefield. He had only seen Zatanna's photo but had never interacted with her before. But he knew Constantine too well. The two were friends and enemies. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they worked together. No one knew Constantine better than him. He turned back to look at Thea and found that she was silent. Papa Midnight did not know what she was up to, but to show his value, he shouted to the other side. "Constantine, you scum! Your old man is here. Come and help me." Laughing and scolding was their way of life. Constantine, who was originally smoking, was a cigarette in between his fingers. He looked at it. Papa Midnight? What are you doing here, you bastard? You actually dared to attack the Cold Flame Church? You've really got guts." Constantine's expression became more serious as he cursed. This matter was getting out of hand. It was not difficult to tell from Papa Midnight's position that he was in cahoots with these soldiers armed with advanced firearms. According to Constantine's understanding of Papa Midnight, this guy was very poor. Any one of these soldiers would have enough equipment to buy Midnight's broken bar. He was definitely not the leader, but a glorious guide. Constantine scratched his messy hair. From the perspective of friendship and from the perspective of being hostile to the Cold Flame Vatican, he should help, but he really did not want to be involved in this kind of big trouble. With his wisdom, it was not difficult for him to see that there were more powerful people behind these soldiers. He shook his head slightly and pulled back Zatanna, who wanted to enter the battlefield. "Niece Zatanna, come and help Uncle Tanarak. Don't you remember that I carried you when you were young?" The Grand Alchemist's voice was a little hoarse because he shouted too loudly, but he did not care. He began to shamelessly ask for help. Even a noble master like him was shameless. Papa Midnight, who had mixed in between the black and white, was even more unscrupulous. He shouted at the top of his voice, "Constantine, my brother, we were drinking together a week ago. Can you bear to see your brother being bullied?" The two of them shouted as if they were on the World Channel. The Grand Alchemist's throat could not take it anymore. He took out a black metal object and put it in his mouth. His voice was immediately amplified countless times. The Alps Valley at night was buzzing because of him. Papa Midnight was not afraid of him. He took out an animal's tongue covered in mucus and swallowed it. His voice echoed on the ground. The two of them were still asking for help at first, but after shouting a few words, they began to curse each other. The Grand Alchemist thought that Papa Midnight was a sewer rat, while Papa Midnight mocked him as a maggot that only knew how to eat shit. "Shut up, all of you. There were too many messy spells in this castle." Thea spent a lot of effort to sweep the entire castle, but she did not find any trace of Papa Midnight. She was already very unhappy, and when she heard their curses getting worse and worse, she was irritated. She ignored both friend and foe and threw out a wide-range psychic shock. Her voice was not loud, but it was very penetrating. Ordinary people, mercenaries, and cultists were all shocked to the ground. Several magic users were shocked. Papa Midnight was the furthest away and was the least affected. He shrunk his neck and did not dare to make a sound. Mr. E was shocked. He had already begun to think about whether to use feather fall or glide when he jumped off the cliff. The Grand Alchemist was the most unlucky. Just as he was about to shout, he was scared back. But Death Knell's willpower was very high, so it was not affected much. Seeing that he suddenly showed a big flaw, Death Knell did not think and slashed down. A skinny left hand was cut off. The Grand Alchemist howled like a pig being slaughtered. He could not hold on any longer. Death Knell slashed 3 times like a storm, cutting the greedy Grand Alchemist into pieces. His movements were too fast. It was not until the fresh corpse fell to the ground that Zatanna, who had just gotten rid of the psychic shock, shouted, "Stop!" Although she was suspicious about the identity of the Grand Alchemist's so-called father's friend, Zatanna still felt angry that someone she knew had died in front of her. She took out a small staff. She aimed the tip of the staff at Death Knell, and a purple brilliance shot out. "Little Ja, don't." Constantine was still a step too late. In his heart, the people of the Cold Flame Church were his enemies. The more deaths, the better. Revenge for the Grand Alchemist? Wasn't that crazy? Go back. Thea did not have a good impression of this reckless woman. She stretched out her left hand, and an invisible wave flashed between her white fingers. This was the irony magic that made the father and daughter famous. This spell was very profound. Thea only got Sargon's memory, not Zatara's. In addition, the old mage was not good at this spell when he was alive. Could only be said that he learned this spell from a few good friends. He was still far from being proficient in it. But Thea relied on her own high magic power and did not need too much skill to cast it.